Hello.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning. Good to see familiar faces. Hope everyone's doing good. All right. I know a few people might be late, but I think we'll might as well just keep going. So some of you know the drill already. We've got 1 hour together. I'll talk you through a few concepts, and there will be some time in the end to ask questions. So my name is Balzhano Razbaeva. I'm Director of Research and Training at UIN. And yeah, my pleasure to welcome you all today. I know we also have a few new people, so let me just perhaps quickly say a few words about our organization. UIN is your partner for all your external engagement needs. We've been around for 15 years. We're based in Amsterdam, but we do work internationally with universities, companies, and intermediary organizations across the globe. What we do is that we support organizations with their external engagement, entrepreneurship, open innovation, strategy, and implementation. And we do so in several different ways. We conduct research on university business collaboration, external engagement, entrepreneurship. We participate and initiate publicly funded projects. So EU.FFICIENT is a great example of that one. This is where we team up with a great number of different organizations, and we're all united by the motivation to support research managers, facilitators, intermediary boundary spanning agents, so to say. So what we do then with all that beautiful knowledge that is being created across those projects, we translate that into something that we would like to give back to our community. So we provide a lot of resources through UIN. So if you haven't yet ever checked our platform, go and check out UIN Insights, because we publish resources almost on a weekly basis. So we have white reports, white papers, briefs, reports, case studies, podcasts. So again, if anything from today might catch your attention, you can also just easily go to the platform and find more information on some of the things as well. We provide training, we provide consulting. As I said, we are a global organization with our biggest base, of course, in Europe, given we're located in Europe, and we're being very active with our European partners. But we are a network of more than 150 organizations across the globe. All right. So yeah, I just also wanted to mention EU.FFICIENT, of course. So there are many more things that you can check out for yourself. There is a platform as well where you can get in touch with like-minded facilitators, research managers, but also we do provide more seminars like these ones going forward. All right. So what is it that we're going to talk about today? Today, the topic is for us asset mapping. So we will be talking quite a bit about ecosystems. But we will be looking at it from different perspectives. So I'll talk you through that in just a minute. But essentially, we're going to look at the internal mapping. So looking basically on your organization and what it means for your partnering capabilities. And the other way around, we will be looking at external mapping. So really focusing on your ecosystem. So why is it important to understand your environment? So this is essentially at core of this session. And as I said, we would like to focus today just on two levels, but if we would have had more time, I would have started today's conversation from focusing on you and your team. So the idea behind this exercise is just to really understand what kind of capabilities, resources you have at your organization, at your ecosystem for partnering, and what can you leverage. So when we talk about you or your team, again, if you are in the role of facilitator or research manager or boundary spanning agent, what is it that you really do and who you are working with, what kind of support you have at place. So really focusing on your resources and capabilities. As I said, this we are skipping today, but I just wanted to put it out there because it's also quite important to be aware of your own capabilities, as you know. We will be looking at your organization and what it means for partnering and external engagement and collaboration from the perspective of what kind of research assets and educational assets you may have in place, Do you provide any capability building, awareness raising activities? We'll be looking at any of the policy or incentive systems you may have in place. Again, resource and infrastructure, something that has been already mentioned before, as well as does your organization have any dedicated offices and personnel? Now, I know we have quite a few friends here joining from the universities. You might be an intermediary organization yourself, but essentially this exercise is for your understanding, especially if you work for a large organization like a university or a large innovation-intensive company, what kind of capabilities you may have in place. If you find yourself in a role of a small intermediary organization, for you, I guess it would be more so important to look at your own environment, but also be aware of what is it that your organization has to offer in terms of some of the partnership capabilities. Now, when we look at the external environment, we refer to also several types of assets: physical assets, industrial, intellectual, human, network, and economic. So this is just to provide you an overview. As I said, today we will be focusing on your organization and your ecosystem. So I will be describing what it actually means in terms of your mapping exercise. But yeah, essentially, I guess the main message that I would like to bring across here is that it is quite important to understand not just yourself and your team, your own capabilities for partnering, but also your organization and your environment. And let's start with organization. So why do organizations need to understand their internal partnership ecosystem, their internal organization, and what can they leverage for partnering? So especially, again, I would keep going back to large organizations like universities or industry. So it's really about looking who is doing what and where can you leverage some of those connections, especially when we talk about collaborations, because often they can be of an informal nature. So really keeping track of who is basically collaborating with who, or who is responsible for what. If you are a university, do you have a partnership office? Maybe there is also career services that are having their own conversations with some of those partners. You may have your European project office that also keeps track of their own connections. But essentially, there are so many different connections and interactions happening everywhere. So really sort of keeping track of all of that so that you can stay aligned. You can support your team and your colleagues better. You can build a coherent front door, especially for those who would like to collaborate with you. Do they even know who they can reach out to? And essentially, it often helps to strengthen the case for more investment for partnering capabilities. And when we refer to internal assets, and this is where we go back to that overview that I have showed you at the start, but when we talk about internal assets, we're talking about those comparative advantages and strengths of your organizations for partnering. And it's important to also, I think, recognize the cultural or relational factors such as top-level buy-in into collaboration. How much support is actually out there? Do you know who the internal champions and role models are, the ones who have experience in partnering? When we talk about research and educational assets, we would refer to some very concrete assets that you can sort of utilize for collaboration or offer for collaboration. We're talking research result, technology, inventions, IP, can also be talent. So researchers, students, research groups. In terms of educational assets, we would be referring to more so training and educational offerings, lifelong learning offerings, MBA programs, challenge-based education. And all of that is, of course, supported by specific mechanisms that you may have in place that would enable partnering and external engagement. And this is where we would be looking at policies, incentive systems, resources, infrastructure, offices, personnel, capacity building, and promotional activities. So the point of this is to really know, have your own internal overview of some of those things, because essentially collaboration is about people. So, but you better have a good overview of who do you have in place. And that basically relates to any kinds of organization, especially if you're coming from a large organization. You may be responsible for your own faculty or your own department. You may be working on a central unit, but it's quite important to have an overview and essentially having access to the right people. So the key success factor in partnering is often finding the right people, not just in terms of who to partner, but also who could you rely on, or who could you get in touch with when it comes to partnering, also within your own organization. And this is just an overview of key supporting mechanisms that we usually observe when it comes to partnering. So I'll quickly talk you through that, but we may have already even discussed this in previous sessions, but I just wanted to remind you of some of those commonly identified ways in how organizations usually support their partnering activities. When we talk on a policy level, and it of course differs on a based on the context that you find yourselves in. Are you based in Europe? Which country are you outside Europe? You may have your own national policies in place, but here we often talk about regional innovation policies, some national frameworks that you may have in place, or on the EU level, of course, we have all kinds of Horizon Europe initiatives or Erasmus Plus initiatives, many different types of programs. If you are in the UK, you have your own programs that might be dedicated to partnering, engagement, and knowledge and enterprise. But generally, again, having an overview of some of those mechanisms that you could rely on. Strategies. These are some of the dedicated strategies that you may have in place in your own organizations that would either provide you access to resources that would support organizations, provision of incentives on recognitions, for example, for academics, to engage in engagement. Again, speaking of a university context, it may also refer to, for example, reduction of teaching time for undertaking collaboration with business or other types of external partners. Speaking of structures, we refer to structural support here. So do you have dedicated personnel and offices that are dedicated basically and are devoted to the topic of external engagement? They can be organized differently, but the point is, again, to have an overview of who some of those colleagues who are responsible for taking care of some of those interactions. For example, from the research perspective, or maybe we're talking more so talent pipelines. And activities are generally some of those supporting mechanisms that would be focusing, for example, on either capacity building or awareness raising, information sharing. But again, do we provide any support in terms of training to our researchers on how they can collaborate? Do they get access to networking possibilities? Are students aware of collaboration opportunities that we at our university, for example, undertake, and can they get in touch with somebody when it comes to internship possibilities? Again, this is just an example, or I would say rather a general overview. Make it your own, because this may differ, of course, it will definitely be different and individual for every type of organization. But just sort of being aware of some of those is quite important. And just generally also to mention that to all of you, especially if you're working in the university or with universities, same applies to large innovation intensive companies. Usually they would organize their external engagement in those three ways. So often they may have, the most common one I would say is the hybrid model. So this is where you would have perhaps a centralized unit that will look after more general university strategy for innovation and engagement, but then you will have decentralized structures, for example, spread across different faculties or research centers, where you would either have an embedded research officer or business developer who would be looking after those partnering activities. But this is, I would say, one of the most common ways, because usually faculties would want to also carry their own autonomy for partnering activities and have their own overview, but usually what we often see is certainly introduction of some sort of central layer at top, where there is at least a certain direction that is provided to organization and governance of external engagement and partnering. Decentralized means generally separate offices or areas of responsibilities for different forms of external engagement. For example, you have a faculty of health and life sciences, and they may have their own technology transfer office or arm looking after specifically their researches and their partnerships. I should mention also that it's a more traditional structure found in universities, because as we know, autonomy plays quite a big role. And also it's important to recognize differences in how different faculties and different fields would engage externally. So this is what we often recognize as more traditional. But as I said, recently we see a trend towards more centralization, but not entirely full centralization, but hybrid models take up quite a bit in the recent times. Centralized unit is a unit or a function that covers types of external engagement activities on a central high university level. And that really helps to emphasize a holistic view of engagement and partnerships rather than isolated activities. Those kinds of models we also sometimes see, and those would be more prevalent for, I would say, smaller size or medium-sized universities or companies who proactively collaborate. In that way, it's just easier for them to keep an overview. Now, I would like to talk to you about how can you best understand and create an overview of your external ecosystem. Why is it important is because, again, not only will you be able to identify some of your potential partners, you could also see whether there are any existing relationships between some of those actors that you may have identified. You could identify gaps and untapped potential that perhaps you can use to leverage for more partnership opportunities. It again helps to coordinate engagement more effectively, and generally speaking, it's just important to keep this overview, especially if you're always on the outlook for new partners, especially if you work for an office that, for example, would be looking after creating new alliances, new consortia. Just keeping that overview of partners and sort of treating it as a living document is, I think, the main message here. Some of the advanced scanning techniques, just to mention, because we will not be able to cover it as part of today's workshop. But if you ever would like to do a very comprehensive analysis of your external environment, some of the commonly identified ways include intelligence gathering, for example, through trend or market analysis, policy and funding analysis, benchmarking exercises. How can you map your ecosystem? By identifying the stakeholders, for example. Once you have identified your stakeholders, perhaps you can also try to identify the connections between them. So doing a network analysis, always keeping your relationship portfolio alive. Engagement and discovery, just sort of some of the primary scanning techniques where you just go out there and talk and discuss and gather information directly from the stakeholders involved. You go and visit them, you organize consultations, but also you can rely on some of the secondary data by doing bibliometric analysis or patent analysis. If, again, you're trying to identify who some of those partners in very specific areas, then relying on some of those techniques can also be very useful. For your own internal organization, if you have a CRM system, is also quite helpful to then see with whom you may have most of the connections or somewhere there is a more potential for collaboration. Again, this is just a big overview of different kinds of techniques. We will not be talking about it today, but this is just to give you a bit of a sense of what is it that you can tap into? And there are plenty of different, also, by the way, AI-powered tools these days. So what I can say, just utilize some of those tools that you may have available for yourself, because it's becoming, there are many more opportunities these days in how you can map your external ecosystem. Now I just would like to quickly also talk to you about how you can keep that living document alive, because essentially, if we were to break it down into some steps, it would be about defining the scope and purpose of that mapping. And it's quite important. The reason I'm saying that is that, of course, when we say external environment, it can be anything really. Let's imagine you are a university in a city A. So then, are you mapping your external ecosystem only in your city, or you're also looking to include the entire region? Perhaps you also want to do it on a national level. So being clear about geographical boundaries is quite important. And would you like, for example, to look at the specific type of activity? Like, are you only looking for collaborators and assets in research, or you are more so interested for collaboration in education? So again, being clear about the scoping from that perspective as well. And to add more to it, what you can also think about, do you have a very clear industry direction or field direction? So are you specifically looking at, for example, food security, or are you interested in AI? So again, even looking more at the sectorial orientation is also quite important. So define the scope and purpose of mapping, collect and analyze the data. So some of the techniques I have showed you before. Again, it can be a very comprehensive exercise. It can also be a very simple exercise where you just gather your data online and just try to create an overview for yourself. In best case scenario, you would like to visualize it so that you know how your ecosystem looks like, and it's just simply also easier to communicate to your colleagues internally, but also externally, validate it with them, whether you're talking, again, to your own team or to your own organization, or you are showing it to your partner. And the idea is to keep it alive, especially, again, if you're working in collaboration and large alliances or consortia. Just keeping an overview of some of those partners in an organized way can be very useful and very helpful for when you are trying to build new collaborations. Now, I just would like to also talk you through types of university-oriented ecosystems, because I think it's just also important to pick a lens on how you could present some of those. This is the model that we have developed ourselves based on the research that we've been doing in attempt to classify of how university-centered ecosystems could look like. Now, if you'd ask me, it's more like a lens that you can take. And with that, I just also want to say that this is what you can do also for your own mapping exercise, whether you are really looking to position it as a regional innovation ecosystem. Does it make sense to look at it more so from the perspective of a knowledge quarter or innovation district? Are you dealing with an entrepreneurship or startup ecosystem, and so on and so forth? So let me just quickly walk you through some of those models that we have identified, with the university at heart, or universities being a large and important actor as part of those. Just to finish this off, being mindful of time, I just also want to now to talk to you about corporate-led ecosystems. And I'm bringing you an example of Siemens that has organized their partnerships really in so-called Siemens Research and Innovation ecosystems. They have, I think, at this moment, 15 or 16 of those. And instead of focusing on just bilateral collaboration, Siemens decided to organize their partnering activities across those ecosystems, because they did recognize that not only do they want to work with their strategic university partners, they also recognize the benefit of involving a larger array of stakeholders into their collaboration activities. So why research and innovation ecosystem approach? So for Siemens, it means working in open innovation networks and really hoping to gain more innovation input for their core technologies. For them, it's also about talent, so creating those talent pipelines, and across those 15, 16 ecosystem, this is where they not only can tap into the university itself, they also are working with academic startups and different types of educational and research institutions. So with that, with this decision moving from strategic partnerships to ecosystem, they really would like to tap into a large and more established network of researchers, customers, and ecosystem actors. Again, a very interesting example. I believe we have a podcast episode that we have recorded on this example in particular. So again, if you would like to learn more why they made this transition from organizing their partnerships from bilateral strategic partnerships to network orchestration or ecosystem orchestration, check it out because we wouldn't have time to cover it all. And with that, I will now quickly add two more types to this framework, and that would be wrap up for today. But this other lens that we can take is a corporate-led ecosystem. Often that is often presented as open innovation ecosystem. It has already strong existing partnerships coming from the corporate side to different actors within the ecosystem. It also does have a clear governance. So in order for Siemens to orchestrate that ecosystem, they have a number of account managers and ecosystem orchestrators sitting across those organizations. Usually across those ecosystems, they would have one very strong actor that would play a role of an anchor. In that particular case, Siemens would appoint their strategic university partners as those anchor points for the entire ecosystem. And that really helps to provide advanced R&D infrastructure and a talent pipeline, which often is one of the main reasons why corporates would want to organize their partnering in such a way so that not only do they have access to talent and innovation, so that they can have a better governance system behind that. Last but not least, something that we will not be covering today because it's a separate topic, but I just also want to mention the entrepreneurship ecosystems and startup ecosystem. That is also another way to look at the ecosystems as well. So the focus would be really on the venture creation and early stage innovation. And those are the ecosystems that are characterized by a strong community density, access to mentors and VC, a strong experimentation, this very, very fun startup culture. There are plenty of examples here in Germany. I think one of the best ones would be Munich case of Unternehmertum and Technical University of Munich. In the UK, some of the strong examples could be London with Imperial College London and White District, where they also create their own ecosystem there as well. So there are many different examples of that, but it is a separate topic. But I just wanted to provide you with a general overview of this framework that we have developed for how you can organize or start mapping out your own ecosystems. But I'm glad you all stuck around, and thank you for listening. If you have any questions, do let me know. Otherwise, I would say we see each other hopefully soon.